Welcome to the Borgen Podcast, the only English language podcast about fictional Danish politics. On our show, we explore the people, events, and parties that make up the fictional Danish parliament on Borgen. I'm one of your hosts, Amy, coming to you from Istanbul, Turkey, and I am, as always, joined by my good friend and co-host Chantal, who broadcasts from her room with a fabulous view in Toronto, Canada. This week, we're going to be talking about episodes 5 and 6 from season 3. And before we get into those episodes, and the episode 5, this is a juicy one, people, very juicy. I would just like to give a shout out to our listeners and people who've been checking us on social media. We have had a little influx of people join our little community in the last few months. So I just wanted to let you all know that we see you and appreciate you. And I've had a few messages with fans and a few emails from people. And it's been all very positive, and just thank you very much for your support. So I'm going to do the info and the lowdown and the nitty gritty for episode 5, and then Chantal will take over episode 6. And my episode is, along with the pork episode, which was one you did last time, right, Chantal?
Yeah, I did that in the last recording. That was episode 4.
Right, episode 4 and this one, episode 5, they're the juicy ones. The pork production, very controversial in Denmark at the time they were released. And my episode is also, in a way, about the meat market because it's about sex work and prostitution laws, or sex work laws, I guess is the more correct thing to say. The episode is called Thou Shalt Not Commit Adultery, and it's really quite interesting. So let's get right into it. In the opening scene, we see Laugesen reporting live on a sex work exploitation situation. 3 captive Romanian women are being taken from some kind of exploitive situation by police, and Laugesen informs the audience that sex work is legal in Denmark for the workers and for the clients. So that kind of gives the background basis. But it's a legal gray area, as we find out. I'm going to talk about this in sections. I'm going to talk about politics, and then I'm going to talk about the media, and then I'm going to round it out at the end with a little dips into like the home life and personal lives of people, because those things are far less prominent in this episode, and there's a lot of material to get through. So that's how it's going to be structured. In politics, we sort of start off hearing from Pernille from the Labour Party, who is opposed to all sex work, and she presents this view in a formal meeting with the New Dems. And Nette says, hey, don't blame the women. They're not the ones at fault here. It's the customers that need to be prosecuted or prevented from hiring women for this purpose. Pernille says she's been talking to the Freedom Party's Benedicte Nedergaard about it, not their party leader, Saltum. Svendage, our favorite villain, the pig cutter. Pernille also presents the idea that other parties and the New Dems could form a majority and oust the government if they can agree on this particular bill. Birgitte said it would be a low blow for Hesselbo, and Nette, who's the prime minister, and Nette correctly says it would make the NDP. Sorry, that's a very Canadian way of describing the New Democratic Party. I think they don't call themselves that on this show, but in my notes it says NDP because of the new
party for people that don't.
Yeah, in actual Canadian politics, we also have a New Democratic Party, and they're not very new. They're not as new as Brigitte's one, but anyway, the New Dems. I would make them look very centrist, which is what they kind of want to be. So they're talking about joining with other parties about this bill, and not necessarily in the government, because I don't think at the beginning of this episode that the New Dems have enough membership to have governmental recommendation, but this bill can get them the kind of membership and attention that they need to get to that point. We don't see John in this episode, who's in the US, but we do see Birgitte kind of revealing while she's talking on the phone to him that she is moderately in favor of a sex work ban, which is kind of interesting because that's not a position I would have expected for her.
No, me neither.
Yeah, very interesting. So as the episode continues in the second section of politics, Pernille prematurely announces on TV a conjunction of the New Dems, Labour, Greens, the Solidarity Party, and the Freedom Party on the sex work issue on TV. Eric points out, interestingly, he points out that kidnapping and rape are already actually covered under the penal code. So changing the prostitution laws might not have helped the situation with those Romanian women, because what happened to them is already covered by existing laws. There's a distinct difference between sex trafficking and sex work, and the actual trafficking numbers are very low. Eric also points out that Katrine and Birgitte seem to be kind of emotionally involved in the case, which is also kind of true. I think that emotions run high on this issue, especially for women, because, you know, it's like a women's issue. It's mostly women who are involved in sex work. Not entirely, but mostly. Maybe there might be more to that than I know about, because I don't know a lot about it. But anyway, carrying on, they're emotionally involved in it. He's trying to be more objective and see what a change in the law could actually do. Like, what is the law? What needs to be changed in the law? He's looking at it from a very legal and objective perspective, actually. Brigitte says her position is tactical because she wants to take Hesselbo down a notch. Pernille's position seems quite rigid and old-fashioned to me, frankly, to go after the client and criminalize the whole business. And that's not my stance. And I'm going to get into that later. I'll talk about the consequences of what I think come from criminalizing sex work. We'll get into it. The Freedom Party seems to want to crack down on, of course, the Eastern European or African traffickers. Yeah, there's issues from both of those regions about that at times. Pernille says any prostitution, any sex work means women are property, basically. But Birgitte wants more understanding and says she doesn't want to sign that bill until there's more research. She does more research. She finds out really what is the situation on the ground, which shows how much she actually listens to her party. Eric said something worth looking into, and she won't charge ahead, even tactically, until the whole issue is properly examined. Katrine advises this could be problematic because it could make the New Dems look like their party doesn't want to help these unfortunate women. But that's not the case. In fact, they're trying to find research to actually help these women properly. And Pernille blames the lack of progress on Birgitte, saying she wouldn't sign. So let me just take a quick glance at my media notes and see if this is the time to get into that. Yes, I will talk about media. Very briefly, we'll skip to the media. First of all, to set up the kind of plot lines of the media, Torben and Pia are continuing their affair. Alex is continuing his tech boy playground management style with his creative room. I cannot tell you how much this annoys me. I hate that guy.
Me too.
I hate his stupid. I'm like, what is this, Pee-wee's Playhouse? It's so stupid. And he has this, I know, he has this stupid idea to segregate the news to show lighter domestic content on the earlier 6 o'clock news and leave the heavier international news for the men who watch later. And obviously the big analysis would be at 8:30 because the poor housewives with their feeble little female brains couldn't deal with that. I cannot tell you, this guy, like, every time he's on the screen, I want to punch him. And I cannot believe Katrine hooked up with him. Like, what a waste of her time, I'm telling you. So that's kind of the setup for the ongoing issues that stretch past this episode. Okay. So we see the TV1 crew, Hannah, Ulrich, and Pia, talking about Birgitte's strategy. Hannah opens the scene saying educated women see sex work as an assault on women and a zone in which to wage their gender wars, which is an interesting take. Ulrich dismissively says, yeah, we know you like legal prostitution. And Hannah says, well, men screw around anyway, better go to a pro, which is an interesting stance and actually quite practical in some ways. It's like, if you're going to require extracurricular activity, why not go to a professional instead of just, like, you know, stooping your wife's best friend or something, or the neighbor, or like, I'm sorry, I've been watching The Sopranos, so all these scenarios are running through my mind. So I've just started watching it again. And so it's like, you know, maybe just get a young Russian girlfriend. I don't know, you know, if your wife's cool with it, it's the way it is. Okay, forget about it. Anyway.
Yeah, that's what they do on The Sopranos. Yeah.
Yes, that is a Sopranos plot line, not one from here.
Yeah.
There are things in that show that are very ironic too. So Hannah says the men screw around anyway, they better just go to a pro. And Pia says sex work and adultery aren't the same. And Ulrich says, oh, so I should feel less guilty about shagging a tart than having an affair. And I'm like, well, it depends on what you agree upon with your partner. If there's consent and you have an agreement, knock your socks off, like do what you want to do. But of course, Ulrich's kind of a tool, so whatever. Hannah asks Torben if he has anything to say, which makes Pia and him exchange a look, clearly building up the drama of their affair. And later they start messing around in the control room, which is probably a dumb mistake because I think someone finds them out.
Someone sees them, but they don't know who sees them.
They don't know who sees them.
And I think it's Alex that sees them.
I think it is too.
Opens the door, looks at them, sees what they're doing, closes the door and walks away.
Yes, and he uses that against Torben later because he's such a dick. And then Hannah asks if there are any more cutbacks planned. So shifts the conversation. On TV, Birgitte says the New Dems can't support a ban like those in Norway and Sweden because of the reasons they discussed in their meeting. All the reasons that Eric brought up about there are some studies that show that criminalizing prostitution makes it difficult for the women. I'm going to come back to that in a second and go through that in detail. And Pernille, because the interview is between the two of them, and the response from Pernille is if something happens, or like if there's like an incident of violence or exploitation, the girls working can just go to the police. Next to which I have ha 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 written in capital letters in bold. We all know how that's going to go. Like, it is so difficult to prosecute sexual assault cases that is a laughable scenario and completely unrealistic. It's just ridiculous. The victim blaming that goes on in law enforcement, and I don't know, maybe Danish police are not as assy as police other places, but come on. That's such a naive and completely unjustifiable response. I can write Pernille off as a politician at this point. So Birgitte sticks to her study, the research she was given by Eric, which, like I said, I'll describe shortly. Pernille says all the facts support a ban, and Birgitte says, but you haven't talked to sex workers. Pernille says she has listened to experts. Well, I'm sorry, but who's more of an expert than the people working in the field?
Exactly.
Birgitte fires back, are you saying sex workers don't know their trade? And Pernille replies, sex work is not a trade. What? Again, this makes me write her off as a politician. It absolutely is a trade. It is, as they say, the world's oldest profession. Prostitution and shepherding. Come on, and money lending. Those are the top 3 Bible jobs. If you want to go back into the religious roots of this, how ancient it is. Anyway, I'm saying it's a job and it should be treated like a job. And I'll get more into that when I talk about the research and bounce back from the media section. So Pernille's response is sex work is not a trade. And Birgitte says, do we not agree that sex workers pay tax? They charge for a service, therefore it's a trade. And she wants enlightenment before legislation. And that is exactly what we want to see as well. Yeah. So bouncing back, I'm going to go through the section where they have the discussion in the party about the research that I just talked about. So it does cause a media uproar that they don't immediately sign this ban, because sex work is one of the few jobs where there's a moral implication of what it actually means and what it is. It's not, to me, as harmful or as insidious as other, appetite-based criminal activity, like drugs or gambling. Those things can actually harm people and harm people's relationships. I suppose sex work can harm people's relationships too, but so can cheating with your friend or your coworker or your secretary.
Yeah.
Or,
well, so just listening to you talk, Amy, it reminds me to bring this up about professions that have a severe moral, ethical impact. And one that we see every day that people may not click into are defense attorneys.
Yeah, exactly.
Defense attorneys, are they not selling their, quote unquote, selling their soul to defend the highest criminals?
Uh-huh.
So why is prostitution and sex work so damned, right?
Yeah. And also, like, is sex work less moral than somebody working in the petroleum industry or the diamond industry?
Yeah.
Or mining that strips entire regions of its
Or the pig
ecosystems?
farming industry, as we
Yeah,
saw in the episode last time, right?
exactly. And like, as another, to quote another of my favorite television shows, The Wire, when Omar Little is on the stand and he looks to the defense attorney for Avon Barksdale and says, he says, the lawyer says to Omar, who's also a criminal, aren't you also a drug dealer and an outlaw? Well, aren't we on the same side though? You got the briefcase, I got the gun. And that's exactly right. And also, people have every right to a defense attorney. That is how the legal system is set up. Everybody deserves to have defense, whether they're guilty or not. And some people who get charged are not guilty. That's just a fact too.
Right.
So, and yeah, everybody has the right to like negotiate their sentence if they are guilty as well. And that's what you need a lawyer for. So, or, a guy with a heavy. Anyway, too much mafia shows. Okay, so there's this uproar. Lagesson makes gross accusations in the press, of course, about Birgitte being power hungry and only interested in her own gains rather than protecting those poor Romanian girls. Ben says 30 people have left the party. People keep leaving the party as this kind of episode at different points. We hear numbers of people who cancel their memberships, which is problematic because the New Dems need numbers to get to be able to run in the next election to get seats in parliament. So Netta presents some really interesting ideas about the whole thing. Katrine also seems to think that all sex work is exploitive, but Netta disagrees. She says where she comes from, that is the non-leafy suburbs, which I thought was a great description because this is a real thing. That is to say, outlying regions of cities, particularly in Europe, that become working class or less affluent because city centers are too expensive, right? So the quote unquote inner city is moving to the suburbs, and it's happening in North America too.
Yeah.
So, Netta says for people from neighborhoods like hers, it is a real alternative to low-paying service industry jobs like retail or other similar work. She gives an example of a girl from school who became a hostess at a nightclub and made a lot of money and didn't become any less popular because of it. And most importantly, Nette said the girl enjoyed her work. So what's wrong with that being a legitimate way to make money? Nette said the party got a call from this woman, Helene, who works for an organization called Sex Workers Denmark, which sounds awesome. I kind of want a badge from them. Ben wants them to arrange a meeting. So she comes and she iterates that the preferred term for people in the industry is sex worker and not prostitute, although the word prostitute is used quite a lot in this episode. I've used it a few times, but I know the preferred nomenclature is sex worker.
Mm-hmm.
She says her organization gives legal and tax advice and general professional guidance. She says they want to combat prejudice and stigma, which is why she's come. She confirms when Katrine asks that they largely represent Danish girls who work in organized legal brothels, and that group accounts for 80% of the sex workers in the country. I'm going to go along with these statistics. I did not go and check these numbers in real, the real Danish stats of this or anything, but it sounds reasonable to me. So I'm going to assume that the writers of the show actually did do their research, although I don't know. I can't say that for sure. But let's say it's correct. Katrine asks what Helene thinks of a ban on sex work, and she answers it with something I actually believe myself. She says it turns sex workers into victims and it's patronizing. And I totally agree. Katrine says she has trouble with the concept of the happy hooker. And this is where good writing comes up in the show. Helene answers that it's weird to associate happiness with a trade. We don't talk about the happy policeman or the happy nurse or the happy teacher. Well, yeah, please don't. Totally agree. This is a job.
Yeah, I thought that was an excellent point, right? And what I thought to that is that it's always women's jobs, right?
Yes.
Or are you happy job?
I have things to say about that. It's in my notes. It's coming up.
Okay.
I have things to say about this. I got so riled up during this episode. I was like yelling at my TV, I swear. So I
was yelling at Pernille.
Oh my God, me too. And that stupid guy on the panel. I'm getting to the panel. I'm getting to it.
Okay, go, Amy.
Yes. So she says this is a job that gets shoved underground when it is illegal, and illegality only lessens the degree of oversight. It lessens the concept of health and safety for the workers and the clients, and it opens the door for that oversight to fall from the hands of the workers themselves, or like an organized business, into the hands of other groups like organized crime, or your general kind of internet creep like Andrew Tate, who is in jail for doing this exact thing in Romania, as a matter of fact. And yeah, that's not going to be fun. So she says in Helene's organization that there are just 200 members of 3,200 sex workers in her organization, but she asserts there would be better numbers if there was less stigma, and I agree with that as well. Without regulation for the industry, Helene asserts, the client and the service provider both get something, with regulation, the client and the service both get something out of the transaction, and no drugs or violence are involved. But in an unregulated industry, this would be a big risk. And we know this is a fact. She also states that though the Romanian girls from the previous episode and the women in similar situations need help, a ban won't help them. It will only drive the industry further underground and cause further chances for exploitation, for putting this work into the hands of criminals. When you ban something, it just criminalizes it. That's why there's drug black markets. That's why there's underground gambling. All of these things, if they were better legislated or like treated like a public health issue in some cases.
Well, let's talk about very quickly birth control, right? Look at countries that have sex education and access to birth control. I'm sure their socioeconomic status is a lot better than countries that don't do that.
Yes, absolutely. And Denmark being one of them that does do it properly, actually. Absolutely. That's absolutely true. And like pretending something isn't there, or like look at abortion. If you ban abortion, it doesn't go away. It just goes underground. And that's very dangerous.
Yes.
People die because of that. So
but again, it's a woman's issue. Sex education,
is a woman's issue,
protection, pregnancy, abortion, prostitution, sex work is all issues. And we know in some countries, including in North America, women are second-class citizens and their issues don't matter, even though men are directly related to this.
Yes, exactly. One of my favorite comedians, as the abortion bans have been rolling out across the US in recent months, one of my favorite comedians, Mark Maron, has a bit in his newest special where he's like, I've heard him say this a couple times. How can men not be interested in abortions? If you've been around long enough and you're a guy, you've probably paid for one. So that's it's what definitely I say too.
When you look at protesting. And again, I will.
When he says it, it's much funnier, by the way.
We are Canadian. Amy and I are Canadian, where abortion laws and rights are far ahead of the States and always have been. And there are actually people from the US, when the ban was announced, trying to come up to Canada to try and get some health care, because that's what it is. It's health care.
Yes. Very similar to actually Ireland. Ireland voted for the right to legal abortions in a referendum in 2019 or 2018, I think. It was very recent. Of course, them being a Catholic country and all. And like previously, Irish women had to go to England to get it done. And that was decriminalized. Traveling to England was decriminalized sometimes in the 90s to get an abortion, but it was still tricky to do. So banning it does not make it go away.
No.
And it's the same with prostitution. So, Helene continues this, and I like the way this is done because it's a really interesting way to kind of educate the audience of the show about the issue as well.
Yes, and I see Birgitte being educated.
Yes, Yeah, and
So,
Katrine as well.
yeah.
Katrine really gets
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah.
So with deregulation or banning or criminalizing, this only drives the industry further underground and makes it much more dangerous. And it shows, these bans show a moral stance of some people in society, and it doesn't address safety. And Katrine, kind of oddly, is a little disconcerted when she tells the others how the meeting went, because Helene says she's also a sex worker, and she's like, "Ooh, I talked to a sex worker," as if this can affect you somehow. Like, whatever. Katrine has her own sex life. I mean, she slept with Alex. Like, why is she judging anybody? Anyway.
Exactly. Oh God.
Well, it's like, I mean, everybody who's not married in the show, and some people who are, have affairs or one night stands or like hookups with people. It happens. There's
Exactly.
really not that much of a difference,
And that's what I was going to tell you. Like in the beginning of the episode, we see Katrine's mom saying to Katrine, "I had an affair."
Mm-hmm.
We see Pia having
Thanks
an affair.
for spoiling it. I was going to talk about that too. No, I'm just kidding.
Yikes.
I'm
Okay.
just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That is coming up.
Okay,
But
I
yeah,
will not get so excited.
No, I know this is such a good episode, though it's hard not to. So no, I'm just messing. Chantal can say whatever she wants. It's her show too. Come on, people.
No, I don't want to distract you. Go ahead, Amy.
No. So it's fine. And there's a lot to talk about, right?
Yeah.
So Katrine gets squeaked out from talking to a sex worker, even though she's left with Alex. And Eric gets straight to the point, and he asks what she thinks of the bill, right? And the quote Katrine gives is that it makes victims of sex workers because they're taxed, but their trade is not officially recognized, which is kind of bullshit. Why should you have to pay taxes on something if it's not a recognized job, right? So Eric has data from Sweden showing that though there is a ban on sex work, there's no actual drop in numbers of sex workers or clients, but more girls, are streetwalking or picking up guys out in the wild, let's say, not in a controlled environment, which is very dangerous, right? Ban a trades associated with these certain human appetites like sex, drugs, or gambling, and a black market emerges without any regulations. It's very dangerous. Eric confirms that assaults increase because there's no way for these women to assess clients beforehand. And probably they also face some violence from whoever is running the racket, because that's what it becomes, an underground racket, right? So your pimp culture arises, and we all know how well those guys treat people. Not very well. I'm sure there are some who do. I bet there are. There's good bosses and bad bosses everywhere.
Yep.
I guess. I don't know. So this research is enough for Birgitte to go on TV and say that they do not support a ban. And she says she will do it. Okay. And that's what I discussed earlier. And then there's this panel. They have this panel. It's like a public panel. There's all these experts. They set this up and they're going to discuss things. And Helene is part of one of the guests that comes for this. So outside the office, Katrine and Birgitte talk about the ban. Birgitte says instinctively that one may wish to ban sex work, and Katrine wonders if she's being a prude. Yes. Birgitte confesses that someone at a conference once talked with her about the impossibility of having a love life as this, diplomatic kind of job, and that one still has needs. And so that person hired a male escort sometimes. Like, what's the big deal, people? Right. And then she said, how come it's cool for a female politician to do it, but not an ordinary man? Why is it scuzzy if an ordinary man does it, but cool if a female politician does it? And I'll tell you why, because female politicians are cooler than ordinary men. But anyway, everything we do. So Katrine gets a text from Pernille saying, okay, we'll have this hearing with sex workers and experts and stuff. And so we have this panel and it's very heated. Helene from the sex workers Denmark isn't given the same opportunity to speak as others are. All the experts speak, and she's not given an opportunity. Another sex worker argues with her about how degrading the experience was for her, but Helene defends her position very eloquently. She has numbers, she has statistics, she has research. She says she chose her profession And some dude with a ponytail, some expert who's sitting next to her, says she's deluding herself because no woman would do that. And it's like, dude, she just said it. No woman would choose to be a sex worker. Dude, the woman sitting next to you just said she chose it. Why aren't you listening to her? And then he compares it to sex with children. Buddy, dude, my dude, shut the up. No, This is not okay.
Yeah.
The grown adult woman has agency.
Yep.
It's another situation where women's words, choices, and experience get explained to them by men. And in my notes, it says, and I'm going to say a bad word. I'm going to say it. If my mom is listening, or Chantal's mom is listening, close your ears. Enough of that fucking shit already. Give me a fucking break.
Yeah.
Helene says adult women are not the same as children and are capable of actually giving consent. Yes, goddammit. Do not infantilize women. You have an expert on sex work sitting next to a sex worker saying she's not capable of making up her mind as an adult woman. I wanted to blow that guy up.
Oh, yeah.
That guy made me so angry. And you can hear, I mean, I usually don't get this excited about issues on Borgen, but like this one really bugged me.
Yeah.
Because it's just so wrong. Like to equate sex work with pedophilia, the whole point of child abuse is that children are too young to give consent. There's a power imbalance. Okay. Even between adults, if there's a power imbalance, you don't, if your boss is pressuring you to fuck him, pardon me, and you don't want to, that's a power imbalance. That's abuse too. Even though in a different situation, if you worked in different companies and that guy wanted to have a relationship with you and you wanted to, and you consented to it, it's a different thing. But you can't coerce people. And it is, that just was the most infuriating thing in the whole show for me, was that guy's comments. Worse than Pernille's comments, actually. Pernille's politicking. This guy's supposed to be an expert and he's just a moron.
Yeah.
That's like the classic mansplaining example.
Yeah.
So someone else quotes a study of sex workers and trauma statistics, but Helene knows her business and says it's one study where respondents had other traumatic experiences such as homelessness, addiction, or experience of war. Others on the panel say really terrible things to her, showing stats that her stats don't match with, and telling her she can't understand what they're discussing because she rents out her mouth and vagina by the hour. That's another quote from another expert on there. And I was just like, I was so furious. If I had been there, I would not have been able to control myself if I'd been on that panel. I would have, even if I was an expert and not a sex worker or a therapist or whatever, I would have shut those people down.
Oh, yeah.
I would have attacked them in a professional manner, not like I've done here, I blew up, but I would take them down. That is completely unacceptable. That is not an acceptable way to speak to anybody. It's like, what is that?
And would they talk to a man like that?
Of course they wouldn't talk to a man like that. Nobody talks to men like that.
Right.
They would never.
Mm-hmm.
So
I know.
After this, let's see if there's anything further on I have more politics and then more media. Okay. So in the next section about the politics stuff, Katrine goes to see Helene later and says she just turned someone away because of the fiasco of that panel. She says in 12 years of sex work, she never felt humiliated and violated like that. And Katrine asked the question that should have been asked all along, which is, how would you have the industry regulated if it was up to you? And the answer, not have the police turn everything upside down in the name of protecting the tax office. Let them hire receptionists and accountants instead of having people who would take those jobs fired or arrested for quote unquote immoral earnings. So which is weird, because if sex work is allowed, why wouldn't you be able to have someone work for you? I don't understand that.
Yeah.
She says they want our tax money, but not give us rights. And there's actually a gray area around that, which Birgitte explains a bit later. So there's this NGO mentioned in the show called The Refuge. I assume it's fictional, working with sex workers. And it is the place where these jacked studies came from. Okay. So Eileen says, her numbers, like she's seen that study, she has those same numbers, and that the numbers have been changed for appearances. There's something wrong with the numbers. So she says those numbers were changed for some kind of payment. This sets Katrine's journalistic instincts off, and in the next scene, she, Netta, and Birgitte are trying to get the real numbers. Katrine finds repeat respondents in the study, up to 400 out of the 1,200, counted as new entries to the job rather than people who have worked in the industry already. And that enables this NGO to get new funding. So that's quite interesting. And it like, there's a couple other podcasts I listened to, If Books Could Kill and Maintenance Phase and You're Wrong About. And on those three, especially where Michael Hobbs is on You're Wrong About as well. Michael Hobbs is one of the podcasters on If Books Could Kill and Maintenance Phase, and he is a killer analyzer of stats. He exposes very well how statistics can be gathered and how they can be presented, and where that doesn't actually give you the actual picture of what's happening. Like, where do those numbers come from? Is this a self-reporting study? Who's saying what? And how is it being used? For example, if I told you that during the pandemic, when online school happened, and I said, oh, 50% of my AP students got a 5, which is the top mark, on the AP exam that year for English literature, that sounds awesome, doesn't it? 50% of my students got a 5. Mm-hmm. Well, there were only 2 students. So it doesn't, like, because people didn't want to do English AP online because it's hard. And so it's like that. Once you see the real numbers, it doesn't sound so good, so you got to figure how these statistics are actually made. Okay. So this jacking of the stats gets presented on TV. Torben calls for Birgitte and Pernille to come on for 6 p.m. I'm shocked he put such a heavy story on that early, actually. I mean, he was told not to because it's the precious little housewives. So they discuss the new info on this, the Refuge jacking their stats. This is where backtracking happens on Pernille's part. And she says, oh, the NGO is understaffed. It was an oversight, blah, 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 blah. Birgitte points out to the street workers, points out that the street workers, the ones where Pernille's numbers and discussions pertain to, are only 20% of the total number of sex workers, and thus their experience does not reflect the majority of sex workers in the country, which is interesting. Again, who are these people? Where are these statistics coming from? How are they made? Pernille holds the line that these women need to be helped, and Birgitte says, why not help them the way they want to be helped? Sex workers should have the same rights as other taxpayers, and surprisingly, when Birgitte goes back to the party office, Hesselbo says, yeah, we should listen to our constituents, and that says sex workers, but that's a sound bite. They strategize how to ensure this won't just be lip service. So they want to approach him and do that. And then eventually Katrine convinces Helene to come to another conference with the government, the actual sitting government, and she and Katrine have a conversation about agency, basically where Helene reiterates that this is her choice and she feels everyone deserves intimacy, and she provides a service while retaining her personal autonomy. She's not selling herself, she's selling her time.
Yeah.
And don't we all kind of sell our time and provide a service in our jobs of some kind or another?
Yeah.
So in the conference, Birgitte focuses on irrational or somewhat contradictory laws, like ones where accountants or receptionists working for sex workers can be charged with immoral earnings unless it is a secondary source of income. That sounds to me very weird. It's like, again, in The Sopranos, where Tony Soprano's job officially is waste management consultancy. So like the gambling racket or the strip club is like a secondary source of income, but it's not immoral earnings because he already has legit income. How does that work? That makes no sense. It's so weird. It seems like an opening for organized crime to me, but maybe that's just my thinking is a bit strange on that. But like, what's the difference between doing an accountant, being an accountant for a dentist's office and being an accountant for a brothel? Like, it's still just accounting. Money, it's numbers.
It's papers and numbers and reports and stats.
Yeah.
And,
And all that stuff, and taxation and all that stuff. So Eric suggests licensing, like license brothels, like regulate them. Tattoo parlors are licensed, for crying out loud. And that's a place where there's a health and safety issue, right? Because there's blood involved, right? So Brigitte proposes a task force to combat trafficking, but in the end, the bill does not get accepted by the government. But it was actually the smart bill. Let me go back and sort of wrap things up, because I think that's about it. They discuss the thing on the news, and then the underlying plots. So the home life of Birgitte, and a little bit on Torben and Pia, and the other relationships in the news office, and a little bit with Katrine's home life I'm going to talk about very briefly. So Torben's wife gives him a hard time because he's missed an event for his kid. He keeps forgetting things with her. She meets Alex, who makes a gross comment about her hotness while threatening to cut Pia's midday news. He doesn't make that comment to her face, by the way, but it's gross. He shouldn't talk about somebody's coworkers, like his coworker's wife.
No.
That's so gross.
That's disgusting.
Later,
that is so
sleazy. He's just sleazy all over. Like, he's so inappropriate.
Meeting my coworker's partner and saying, "Oh my God, your partner is so hot."
No, I know. And like, I work with one of my administrators in my school is a tall, handsome, charismatic dude. That's just the way he is. I mean, he smells expensive. What are you going to do? But you don't say that to his face.
No.
And his wife is like a fitness instructor, and she's like really nice and really beautiful. And, but I wouldn't go like, "Oh, way to go, buddy. You got a hot wife." That is so inappropriate.
I know.
Even if I was a man, I wouldn't say that.
I know. It's gross.
It's so gross. It's just so over the line. So for him to have qualms about what Torben's doing with Pia is ridiculous, because he has no morals anyway.
Exactly.
So anyway, he apologizes. Torben apologizes. He apologizes to her because Pia. Torben apologizes to Pia because Pia is forced into seeing her and conversing with the wife, right? And they're having a thing. And the number of times Torben touches Pia's butt in this episode is just too much for me. I just like, please stop.
Yeah.
So it was kind of funny though. But then we see Alex and Torben in Alex's dumb playroom, and all the suggestions Alex has that that Torben had previously disagreed with are going to get implemented, because that's always what happens. And he also lets on that he knows Pia and Torben are having an affair, but acts like it's not a big deal. But obviously he's going to blackmail. Okay. Now we see Philip here a few times. He brings Magnus home, and for some reason, this is like the cute Magnus moment. And for some reason, Magnus is showing some attitude to the parents. Like, he goes to get himself some muesli before dinner, and she's like, "Oh, dinner's in half an hour. Don't eat that now." And he's like, "Christ, it's so funny." And he's just, and Brigitte goes like, "Oh, and I see you rewarded him with new trainers. And we're terrible parents, because I would have done exactly the same thing." So it's nice to see that good co-parenting happening.
Yeah, definitely.
We find out Jeremy is coming, so they want to swap child days. Like, she wants Philip to take the kids, and he suggests that the kids meet Jeremy, which they do later. When Jeremy appears, it's after the debate on the TV, and he points out how Scandinavia is known for sexual freedom, and to ban sex work seems weird to him. That me too, as a non-outsider. Like, we have too. This. It's because of all those 60s art films, like I Am Curious Yellow from Sweden, that they show boobs early in cinema, so we assume they're like sexually liberated. Whatever. So we just have that idea about Scandinavia, right? So Brigitte says it's politically sticky. It's hard to get in touch with sex workers because of the stigmatization, and it's the same for clients. Jeremy says he has no issues with sex work as long as both parties consent, and he admits when asked that he has used such services, And Brigitte says, ooh, she kind of recoils at that. And she's like, it's different because of the exchange of money. She finds it degrading for women to accept money for sex. I think this argument is just another way for women's work to be undervalued. As soon as women get money for something, it becomes a morality question. And like, for example, take professional chefs. The majority of pro chefs in top restaurants, especially I'm sure it's still like this. There are a few famous ones that are women now, but it's been men traditionally for so long, but who cooks at home? You know what I'm saying? As soon as that work gets moved into a paid atmosphere, it becomes like it's important work, so men must do it. And it's just so silly. And the majority of men are not going to be providing sex service for other men. That exists as well. It's really not touched on here.
No, and also sex work for men who take female clients.
Mm-hmm. Which is briefly touched on, but homosexual prostitution isn't even talked about here because conveniently the gay character John is out of the country. They're like, yeah, we can't do an episode. We can't have both. That's too much for the people. It's kind of funny. So that just gets glossed right over. I'm not going to talk about it because I'm no expert either. So he says it's fine as long as these two parties consent. And, as soon as this question of women's work that women do, getting money for work, childcare, all of these things, it's always supposed to be something that we do out of the goodness of our pure and simple hearts. But sex work is dirty, so we can't do that.
Yeah.
Whether it's for money or not, right? You take money for it, you're a whore. You don't take money for it, you're still a whore. So you might as well get paid. That's my Hannah Holm character coming out, right? The double standard for women too is ridiculous. So Jeremy says you buy the service and not the person. And they kind of have this little moment, but he's still very nice and solicitous, and they make up. And Brigitte's having issues with her hand, and he takes that seriously and wants her to go get help about it. And then he meets the kids, and they both really like him. He goes and plays PlayStation with Magnus, and he talks to Laura, and she really likes him. It's really nice. It's really very nice. And then Brigitte asks Philip the same question about sleeping with sex workers. And he says, a man can only deny it, but says no when pressed. And he's like, Brigitte, you're the mother of my children. You're the only woman I've ever slept with. And we know that's not, of course it's a lie, but he's just saying that to deflect. He's absolutely, it's a joke. He definitely doesn't mean it.
His girlfriend was Cecile.
Yeah, we know. Yeah. I mean, we know this, right?
Yeah.
So, and she says it's a really complex issue. Her guess being there's 100,000 men who use services like that in Denmark, and they can't all be psychopathic sex offenders. She's like, it gets broken down into such black and white issues. The women are abused and damaged and weak, and the men are psychopathic sex offenders. And it's neither one of those things is true.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then very briefly, we see Katrine and her mom reconcile because in a previous episode, they'd had this big falling out, but they make up. She's helping with the childcare again. And that's, yes, there is a little incident with them when she reveals that Katrine's mom is like, I had an affair with the next door neighbor when your brother was 6 months old because having a baby is so overwhelming and freaked everybody out. It just disrupted everything so much. So she's obviously has growing sympathy for Katrine's situation. Right. And I thought that was really funny. Katrine's shocked, Can you imagine your mom coming to you and telling you so? I'd be like,
but here's the thing about that. What if the neighbor was not available? What if sex work in Denmark was legalized to the point where you can get it as a service? Maybe Katrine's mom would have done that.
Yeah, exactly.
Being stressed out in the house with the baby. Maybe the marriage is she's fighting with the husband or whatever. And she needs some relief and relaxation. And if they have an agreement about they can have other lovers, and you can't find another lover, then maybe you would use a service.
Yeah, I really don't see the issue with it. I think it should be legalized, licensed, regulated.
Yeah.
It keeps people from getting killed. That's basically it.
But again, it's the value, right? Who are the
Yeah.
women that are in compromised situations? It's women.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
And
So
also, like, not to mention like the spread of STDs and stuff. Like, if it's a regulated industry, like, there are rules, and if you don't follow the rules, you can kick the guy out, like, it's
yeah,
like, it's all about health and safety. There should be like, it should be like any other service, it's
yes.
really, the more oversight there is for a profession where people are vulnerable, then, like, we don't let doctors just, like, examine us with like bare hands and like dirty fingernails, like, there
Yeah.
are regulations.
And even in the height of the pandemic, there were regulations. You had to wear a mask. You had to take
Yeah,
your temperature,
I
right?
had to go to the dentist during the pandemic. I had to. And like,
Mhm.
you should have seen my dentist. He was like head to toe hazmat suit. I was surprised he could breathe in there. It was
Yeah.
just like, he had such good PPE, and I felt so safe. And then when I saw him like later, because we held our graduation like after things had kind of let up, for the kids that had graduated that year. And I saw him there because his son was in the graduating class. And I was like, he came up to me and he said hi. And I'm like, oh, hi. It took me a minute to recognize him. Like, without the PPE, I forgot what his face looked like.
Yeah.
So, I looked into his eyes and I saw it. So we also see Casper come over at like towards the end of the episode, later in the episode, middle of the episode, I guess. And he says that sex work story is really big. Katrine says the research is fun and asks if they broke up because of no sex after the baby. And this is where things get weird with Casper again, because it's always weird with Casper. He straight up tells her that Katrine didn't turn him on anymore. The sexual side died down for him when they became a family, which is, of course, connected obviously to his own issues with being abused, but could also be due to the fact that he's immature and can't see women as both lovers and mothers at the same time. But then he says there's something wrong with him. And I think like that's so typical as well. Again, undervaluing the ways that women can have a more than one role in life.
Mhm.
Like, you can be a mother and still be hot. Look at Brigitte.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, her husband is super handsome. Well, of course it's a TV husband, so, but still. And her boyfriend is super handsome. The driver was pretty good looking. Like,
Yeah.
remember Kim?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's like she has a sex life and she's a mom. Like, what's the big deal?
Mhm.
So Katrine says she's sorry she talked him into having a baby, but Casper's like, no, he's the best thing that ever happened to me, and it never could have happened with anybody else. And then they both start crying, and I got annoyed with them. And then, like, where there's at some point when Katrine's at TV1 and like Alex is flirting with her, and then he kind of strikes out. And I can't remember if it's this episode where he shows up, or episode
No,
6.
it's my episode.
Yeah, but like, really, what happened to the gym guy?
No, I think Casper
Benjamin from the
wants
gym? He was
wants his
cool.
cake. He wants his cake and wants to eat it too, right? Like
Yeah, except he
in
doesn't
my
want to eat
episode,
it.
which we'll talk about in a second, he wants attention from Katrine,
Constantly. He
right?
constantly wants her
But
attention.
then
He's
when it comes to
Yeah.
intimacy, there's now a problem because she's a mother. And I was I found in this episode really interesting that certain things came out of people's mouths that shocked me and made me think differently of them. Number one, Pernille. Number two,
Yeah.
in this nonsense with not being attracted to Katrine. Why wouldn't you be attracted to Katrine anymore? And then the third thing was Brigitte's reaction to Jeremy when he said that he has gone to a sex worker, and at that point the camera had come right up into her face, and you
Yes, it's super close up.
like the flicker in her eye of like disapproval, and the way she just like, well, it's totally different. It's you're taking money for it. And I was so surprised because to me this is not Brigitte's politics.
Yeah.
Right, I'm surprised.
Yeah, but it was interesting that there's a public view and a private view. And I think that's maybe good for
Yes.
politicians to compartmentalize. And they represent ideas. They represent ideas that belong to more people than just them, right? Their party's ideas. They have to represent. She's been the prime minister, so she's been in charge of representing the people. So
Yes.
there's,
It's
some
very
differences
real,
there.
actually, to see her and any of those politicians, at work, and then
Yeah.
to see at home of what they really think, right?
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
true. I think that's a realistic view.
Yes. And like I said, like this was such a complicated issue. And it's like, I'm really glad that the show went so far as to have a representative from the industry say, like, this is what happens, and have that Swedish study. I don't know if those are actually the real situations in the countries, but I'm going to assume that they are, or it's close. And that, like, it's such a good point to say that, if you make these things illegal, they do not go away. They just become more dangerous.
Yeah.
And again, that's devaluing women, right? If you're not concerned, or the society isn't concerned about their safety, their well-being, yes, it's just like further degrading them. Actually, it's like,
Yeah. You're not taking them
we yes, we don't approve of what you're doing, so we're definitely not going to help you make it safer, and because we don't care if you get killed or injured or sick from your job.
Yeah.
And I guess that's true of a lot of like, quote unquote, low skill, low paying service jobs. Like, people don't care if somebody who's working as a cashier can afford snow tires or whatever, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
or I guess if you live in America, health insurance. The rest of us have that covered, basically. It's just like, it just so further degrades women, and it's so unfair, And I realize this is quite a long episode. It's one of the thick ones because it's mid-season. So it's a dense and chewy one. Episode 6 is coming up. And
I just wanted to say one more thing. And I was watching this film, or this show, and it made me think of a film I saw that came out in 2010 called Special Treatment. It's a French film that came out at the Toronto International Film Festival, and I may actually have seen it in person at the TIFF, because I'm a huge fan of Isabelle Huppert, Huppert.
yes.
The film is directed by Jean Labrune, and it is about sex work. So Isabelle Huppert plays a sex worker, and in the film, what they're doing is there's two storylines. There's her as a sex worker, but then there's also a psychiatrist side by side her, and he's got his own life and career. She's got her own life and career. But what the audience ends up seeing is their lives are not that different. They're both there to support, give a service to people, and all the headaches that come along with that, like billing and scheduling appointments, the preparation that he does to listen to his clients and give them feedback and support, versus the preparation that she does to understand exactly what it is that they fantasize about, and to get into costume and to get into the role play that they're interested in to give them the best experience possible. And what the two realize, and the two end up meeting in the movie, and he becomes a client of hers, but he's very kind of trepidatious because he doesn't know how to navigate his way through with this woman. They both of them quickly realize that they share two things in common, which is they navigate through these overlapping worlds of helping people, but they're the same. They're both providing a service, right?
Yes.
So I thought
Same.
that was very interesting.
A very similar theme came up because, like I said, I'm binging The Sopranos right now. Partly because I talked to my therapist about it. But anyway, and there's therapy in it. But there's an episode in season 1 where one of the boss, a guy named Jackie Aprile, dies of cancer. And he used to visit this, I think it's him. I think it's his character. He visits the madam of this brothel. No, it was a cop. It was a dirty cop who helped get info to Tony about what's going on in law enforcement and stuff. And he commits suicide because of the pressure, right? And the madam at the brothel where they go on occasion talks about like, you know, how they supported each other, like he's been a real friend to me kind of idea. And like, you know, and Tony goes, what, you mean like therapy? And she's like, of a sort, in a way. You'd be surprised how much people open up when you're naked and in bed with someone who cares about you.
Yeah.
You know, and that's absolutely true. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And
No, I think it's absolutely healing. It's stress relief. It's time efficient. It's fee for service, and it's mutually beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I got a call to make after this show. Just kidding. Just kidding.
That's funny.
Well, you know, it would be nice. I'm just saying.
Of course it would be nice, especially now in the pandemic world. I mean, where do we meet people?
Yeah. And like,
we do, you and I have both done online dating.
Yeah.
Right.
Me, never successfully.
What if we paid for a service for online dating? Does that make us horrible people?
People do that. There's definitely paid online services. Yeah. I mean, what's the difference between a matchmaking service and that? I guess the idea is, you know, it's not a transactional interaction per se, right?
No,
but going to a sex worker is transactional.
Paid service led to a date with someone, and let's say I'm taking the person out and I pay for dinner for them, and let's say we end up having some intimate moments. Did I buy them because I bought them dinner?
If you are a heterosexual man and you take a girl out and a woman out and you pay for dinner, you think she owes you some of them. And it's like, no, buddy. No, I don't owe you anything.
Whereas I don't, as a gay gal, that's not the way I navigate through life. Women don't owe me anything.
Yeah. That, and like the fact that you're a civilized human adult, you know, like men are fully capable of acting. Yeah, it's a matter of respect. But I've certainly come across that attitude. Like, I bought her dinner and she didn't even do anything with me. And it's like, maybe if you didn't go into it thinking that this is something she owes you because you bought her food, you might get some.
I will say two things. Women can pick that up if they have motives. And number two, this is the part where we say, Amy, together, hashtag, not all men.
Yeah, exactly. Boo hoo hoo. Yeah, exactly.
Not all men.
It's like, what do women want? They're so confusing. They're such mysterious creatures. It's like, we want to be treated like adult humans. Thank you.
I know.
That's it. Big mystery. You know, like, how hard is that? Seriously, my God.
But yet a lot of people can't get it right, even in the woman world. I mean, you know my track record. How many success stories do I have to brag about? I mean, women don't get it either. So if women and women can't get it, how can men and women get it? And again, of course, hashtag not all men, not all women. We know that. We're just trying to
we're making a point and generalizing on purpose. Yeah, so that was a good and juicy episode, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. And
I enjoyed it too. I felt so riled up and passionate and upset and happy, and I'm also very surprised at Katrine and her attitude, because she's a young woman, she's in a progressive profession.
Yeah, in a progressive country.
Sheltered this young woman's mind is of looking at sex work, right?
Yeah.
And let's not forget, Katrine is someone that has multiple casual lovers all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And makes very poor choices, might I add. Who on earth is attracted to Alex?
Yeah, gross. I mean, as Torben says eventually, he wears male jewelry.
That's in my episode.
Episode. Yeah, I'm sorry I spoiled it, but that was such a funny line to me. Like, I laughed out loud when I heard that.
Oh God, that was so funny. So with that, should I take it into mine?
Yes, and that dumb creative room. Every fiber of my being just hates it. If I ever went to a job like that, I'd be like, I'm not working here.
Oh, I would see that and leave.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, these are some idiotic people right here. I don't need to be spending my life with.
Sure.
All right, so I'm going to be talking about the next episode, which is still in season 3, episode 6, and this one is not as juicy as Amy's story, or Amy's episode. Amy's episode was really explosive and dense. Mine is so we open up New Democrat headquarters, and I will say to listeners, please forgive me if I mispronounce. We have a new character here called Soren Ravn. And I'm trying really hard to listen to the way they say it. And I know I'm not getting it as good as the Danish native speakers. So you'll have to forgive me on that. But know that I'm
Raven.
trying my best.
His name is Raven.
Raven?
No, it's not
so
at
the
all.
English speaker, so the Russian guy later on says Raven, but the Danish people say it sounds like Ravn.
Yes.
Ravn. So I will try to say it like them, and I hope I'm not making people's ears bleed. But anyways, so this episode opens up at New Democrat headquarters, and Bent announces that the New Democrats have 20,000 signatures, which makes them entitled to run for parliament. And the whole team cheers, and they have a celebratory drink together. Brigitte
despite the sex work people leaving, right, from the last episode. They've done it.
Yes. So Brigitte says she has a candidate in mind who would be their economic spokesperson. He was running for the Nobel Peace Prize 8 years ago. His name is Soren Ravn. Eric Hoffman does not like him, and neither does Jan. Bent does not like him and points out that Ravn was a skirt chaser. And Brigitte says he's Denmark's leading economist. And Brigitte says, ask the team who is more competent than him to draw up an economic policy, and that he can be a vital piece to their campaign. So they take a vote. It seems to be a tie. Then they take a second vote, and Bent decides to raise his hand, which makes a tiebreaker. And now that means that they're in favor of Ravn joining. And I will talk about a little bit about this actor who plays Ravn. His name is Lars Mikkelsen. And he is the brother of Mads Mikkelsen, whom I always associate to be the male actor, most popular male actor in Denmark, at least to a North American like me. And this actor that plays Ravn, he actually had a role in The Killing, as well as he played the president of Russia in the American TV series House of Cards. And he's an international Emmy Award winner for a role he played on a Danish TV series in 2018, and the drama is called Herrens Veje. So again, I apologize because I know I'm probably butchering that pronunciation.
Herrens, it's probably way. It probably means like Voyager way. Vega, probably.
Herrens, Herrens is the first word, and Veje. So I'm not sure. And
Veje, Vea, maybe.
I don't know. Anyways, he is an excellent actor, this fella they've got here to play Ravn. So at TV1 the next day, Ulrich is interviewing Birgitte and Ravn about his new role. Ravn admits that he knows more about economics than certain politicians, and that he's entering politics because he has views that he wants to fight for. And now there's a scene between Jan and Birgitte, and it's at the end of the day, and they're alone in the office, and Jan says, it's great that Ravn is positively received, but it doesn't absolve you from responsibility. You're imposing your own agenda with the help of your little soldier, Katrine. Brigitte tells him he's acting with his ego, and he tells her, you're acting like some absolutist PM, not as a team player. And Jan is mad because this is a vital post that she's advertised for, and she has brought an outsider in to fill the role. And
also, it's supposed to be him.
Yes.
Jan's the economics guy.
And we will see this in Jan's character in this episode here, but I think part of his personality also makes it into Power and Glory, because him and Brigitte are both together in Power and Glory. And why I like Jan is that he speaks up to her. As much as I like Brigitte, as we all do, sometimes it's good for someone to call her out on things sometimes, just to keep her in check. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
of course.
They have a good relationship together. I mean, they have a respect each other. And I think it's important to have a person like that on her team, to be honest.
Yes, me too.
So we're now at TV1, Amy, in your favorite place, in an executive meeting with Alex, who has a smile to say they're pulling the 12 p.m. news because the focus group answered no, and they would not miss the 12 p.m. time slot. When the executive board asked Torben straight up, what does your staff say? Torben is politically correct and says they understand the situation. So back in the studio now, he leaves the meeting. Torben goes to the studio, and Han, of course, asks loudly as he walks through the door in front of everyone, quote, "Did you tell them that we were against abolishing the 12 p.m. news?" Han says the 12 p.m. news is the only thing distinguishing them from TV2. And Torben tells her that a focus group gave their opinion, because he's trying to be politically correct, right, and not cause arguments or disruption. So he says the focus group gave their opinion, and Han says she does not look impressed because it means that Torben does not have a say in anything anymore. That's the look I got from Han's face. She knows that his power is slipping away.
Yeah.
At the New Democrats headquarters, Eriksson is reminding everyone that Ravn preached that Denmark should be a communist dictatorship. Birgitte reminds him, and this is Ravn in the past, right? And in this episode, there is so much of Ravn's past that becomes unfolded as the episode goes on. And even as an audience member, we don't know what to believe, right?
Yeah.
Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Is he going to come screw up Brigitte's party? Not.
And can I interject something here?
And
So he was a member of the Communist Party. He was a practicing communist, a socialist, like heavy socialist, quite far left. And in the European, we don't see this in North America, like the Red Scare and McCarthyism and everything, like just vilified communism so thoroughly. And, after the wall came down and we saw what things were like, it vilified itself as well. But anyway, at that time in the 80s and 90s, and actually from the Russian Revolution forward, there's always been an element in European politics of left-wingedness, and socialism and communism. There are communist parties in every European country. And it's not uncommon, especially for young people, to really fight for the left, from that extreme point of view. And of course, now, personally, I've had friends, I have friends in Eastern Europe, in Czech Republic and in Romania and stuff, who grew up under those regimes. And they certainly had a different point of view than the Marxism, which is, the rights of the worker and owning the means of production, and everyone works according to his ability and everything, which is not an unreasonable idea. But in practical terms, communist regimes generally became super oppressive and totalitarian, and that it just doesn't work. And so there was always, and especially during the Cold War, anyone who professed to be a communist could be accused of espionage. And that's the issue that we're going to talk about in this episode, that you're going to talk about in this episode. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to say it's a bigger factor here than it is in North America.
Yeah.
For our
and thank you for that insight,
audience.
You know more about this stuff than I do, and I'm sure you're also enlightening some listeners that may not know of this history.
It's only because I live overseas. That's only because I'm living in Turkey, and I know that is a thing around here. Not in Turkey per se, although there is one town that's run by communists, apparently, Ovacık. They have great honey. They have really good cooperatives, of course. Great produce from that region, like chickpeas and stuff. But yeah, it is a factor here, and it's much more common here than it is in America.
So bringing it back to Borgen now. So in this conversation, Birgitte reminds him that this was 30 years ago, and they need to put it behind them and to give Ravn a chance. So the next scene, Ravn is at party headquarters and is presenting to the group about economics. Katrine and Jan have a funny moment together where he looks at Katrine and whispers if she has a crush on the teacher, which is Ravn, right? And she says no, and asks him if he does, and Jan answers that he's drop dead gorgeous.
So yeah, I like so cute. Yeah,
little, between coworkers, I guess. This here's the new guy. We have a little crush on him. So Ravn tells them that his proposal for a new finance policy for the New Democrats is going to be based on an understanding of the complexity and connectedness that we are all a part of, whether we like it or not. Katrine gets tipped off that the Express is going to be running, which is, of course, Michael Lageson's trashy newspaper. Katrine gets tipped off that Express is running an article tomorrow about Ravn, which says, quote, Brigitte's new candidate is a Moscow party soldier. Katrine and Ravn head out to smoke, and she asks him if he was in the Communist Party for 13 years. And he says yes, but that was when the wall fell and it was hard to stick to his convictions. He said that he had a lot of soul searching and came out of it. And now communism is something he strongly does not believe in today. Now we flash to Torben and Pia. Torben is getting new pressure from Alex, and it's clear that he looks exhausted over all this. And Pia comes in to see how he's doing and to tell him that their time together was lovely. They plan to do it again, but it's tricky to navigate because Torben is expected to be home. And their interaction, this interaction with Pia is the only thing making him smile and relieve stress these days. And the other stress, of course, is the stress that Torben is facing with the TV1 team questioning him about things going on, such as his team, Han and Simon and Ulrich, going on, and he has to be politically correct and give careful answers. So he's kind of grieving by himself.
Torben has a lot of inner turmoil, actually.
He has a lot of turmoil and pressure. And I really like this actor, Soren Malling, because I think so convincing. Like, we really feel his pain about being conflicted about his ethics and politics when it comes to work. Versus Alex, versus his team, versus staying true to himself. So I think this is a really juicy season for Torben, actually.
And it's interesting. It's an interesting development for this character, because previously when we just saw him as like Katrine's boss, he was always kind of like a hard ass, and like kind of flippant and a bit mean at times. And it's nice to see this complexity with this character.
It is, because you and I always joke that Torben can be a dick, but when we see him in this episode, I do feel sorry for him.
Yeah, me too.
I feel terrible for him. Nobody wants work pressure, right? On top of that, he's got pressure from his wife, understandably so. He's got pressure from his team, and also he has a firecracker personality. It's not easy to have to be silent and listen to all this going on and not being able to express how you feel.
Yeah, exactly.
So the next scene now, we're at the hospital. Birgitte is there. And as promised in your episode, Amy, she promised Jeremy that she's going to go and get checked out. And I had to comment about, and maybe it was the lighting in the hospital or what, she looked impeccable. Her outfit was so professional and sharp. And I was just like, oh my God. And of course, we all know I have a big crush on Birgitte, as I'm sure listeners do. Whether you're a man or a woman, how could you not be enamored by this woman as the prime minister and everything else? But all she was wearing was a shirt. I looked it down and I'm like, why does she look so hot all the time, especially now? And it was a shirt, jeans, blazer, high heels, and a purse. And I thought she just looked impeccable.
I saw that look and I was like, I should dress like that for work. Like, she looks like an adult. I look like a teenager when I go to work.
I saw that and I'm like, wow, I should dress like that too. Wouldn't I look nice if I dressed like that? Anyway, so what I noted, which I thought was very cool, is that there was no security around her, which I found surprising, because if a former PM here in Canada, I don't think a former PM might be able to walk around. So because only two and a half years passed only.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. I've never run into any former PMs in the wild.
No,
I did see Justin Trudeau at Pride, though.
Yeah, we were together.
Oh, we were there together. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
He had a lot of security around him, but he was also the active prime minister, as he still is the active prime minister here.
Yes.
He had a circle of security, and a friend of mine I was watching the parade with, not the year you were here, another year. My friend Adam, he was commenting that underneath the vests are weapons or tasers or whatever it is to help control the crowd. But there was never an issue with Trudeau marching.
Of course not.
And when he's been prime minister, I think he's marched every single Pride except one.
Yeah, COVID.
I thought was very cool. Not the COVID years. No, because the COVID was shut.
Right, it didn't happen. Yeah.
But another year, he must have had a conflict. But it was wonderful to see our prime minister there.
I do believe in the one I saw him, which is also where like Brooklyn Heights, the drag queen, was a big star, big feature.
Yeah.
They did an interview on Instagram. It's really cute. it's really cute because there's like some flirting going on almost.
I
It's
saw
quite
that.
cute. I do believe he did get squirted with water pistols, and that was
Oh,
perfectly acceptable.
but that is a huge thing at Pride here. That's
It's
that
huge, yeah,
you have
because
to
it happened. Yeah, the end
expect
of June in
to get sprayed.
Toronto, everybody wants to be squirted with water pistols at that point because it's so hot.
But I know the Instagram post you're talking about with him in Brooklyn
Mhm.
Heights. They're standing side by side, joking around and laughing. And Trudeau introduces Brooklyn Heights to say that she is the queen of the North.
Yes,
That's
correct.
the one, right?
Yes, it's
I
so
thought it was,
cute. It's so
I thought it
cute.
was so cute. So, anyways, yeah. So she's walking through the hospital like an ordinary citizen, and I was joking to myself because I work in a hospital.
Yeah.
I thought, oh my God, what if I stepped into the elevator and saw Brigitte? I should be concentrating on taking my notes. And I'm like, oh my mind wandered. I'm like, oh my God, what if she's in the elevator when I go into the elevator? But in my job, in my current role now, I don't work in the hospital proper. I work in an administrative building, so I wouldn't run
Yeah.
into Brigitte. So there's a nurse there that says that they want to do a biopsy on her. And she goes to speak to the doctor for more information. And he tells her, she tells him she's been having some pain in her hand. And he said, based on the mammogram, he wants to do a biopsy on her now. And she tries to get out of it because she's busy, but insists that she does it now. So next morning at TV1, Han comes forward, takes charge, and asks Torben pointed questions about what exactly is going on. I love Han, right? Like, doesn't go around the bush, get straight to the point, not into nonsense, right? Torben is careful, and he tries to defend it by saying it's actually a very tough, it's actually a very thorough and modern plan. He's trying to justify this executive decision, right? Han starts to get mad and asks if he can blame the team for being so reactionary. Torben loses his temper and yells.
Oh yeah, he yells
very loudly. And he says, give me an effing break. You never stop moving. He got like scary.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, he kind of cracked.
Yeah. Oh, he cracked. I was watching.
And it was about automated cameras, I think, or something like that.
I don't remember, but all of this.
I just watched that episode today, right before we started recording. So it's fresh.
Fresher in your mind than in mine. Yeah. So Torben asked about Ravn, and he changes the topic, right? And he asks about Ravn, and Pia says that Ravn's criticism on the Liberals' economic policies seems to be pretty sound. Torben has an idea to invite Ravn into the studio, and Pia says, let's get the Liberal spokesperson too. So Birgitte comes home from work. She hugs Laura. As soon as they embrace, Birgitte yelps in pain that her shoulder is paining her, and she quickly tells Laura that she banged up her shoulder at work. Casper is back.
Doesn't the doctor, when he gives her the biopsy, and she said, oh, so quickly, and he said, it's the law that you enacted when you were PM.
That's coming, Amy.
Oh, I'm sorry. I jumped the gun. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Don't worry. I did it in yours too. I just get excited, right? With talking about books. So Casper is back now. He's back with his hair fully grown out and a bit longer beard, looking much better than that horrible shaved head. That's my opinion. I didn't like the shaved head.
Yeah, totally. No, me neither.
And I like the longer beard. I think he looks really handsome. So he's at TV1 and he's come by to say hello to Katrine. Ravn finishes his interview at TV1 and comes to find Katrine, and the two of them don't even say goodbye to Casper, and they take off together, obviously friendly towards each other, and Casper's left silent, watching them, perhaps feeling dejected that Katrine did not pay attention to him when he showed up, and she takes off with Ravn. And this is why I said in your episode that he wants his cake and wants to eat it too.
Yeah, totally. He always does this to her.
Yeah, I mean, it's unrealistic to want her attention, but then tell her, I don't find you attractive. I don't want to be with you in an intimate way anymore. So
I don't want to sleep with you, but you're the mother of my children, so you're not allowed to sleep with anybody else.
Right.
What?
Exactly. And you should pay attention to me and don't walk off with another man. I don't think so.
Yeah, but she can find, orange bras under his bed and stuff.
Yes.
Like whatever.
Yeah. Anyways, there's another damning headline against Ravn that's come out. It says that he's a Soviet spy. Eric Hoffman is not happy and expresses frustration. In the next scene, Birgitte and Katrine speak one-on-one with Ravn, and she questions him about his time in Moscow and how many times he went there. and what was he doing there, who he saw there, and the last time he went back there. Katrine says the best policy is transparency, and to make all of this information available to them. So Ravn agrees, and the next day he brings multiple big shopping bags with newspaper clippings and pictures. So he's cooperating with them, right? He understands that this is a conflict, right?
Yeah.
So the next scene, Birgitte's outside unlocking her bicycle, and Lagerson drives up. He tells Birgitte that he likes their transparent angle with Ravn, and tells her not to think that they will print in the Express whatever she wants, with a sarcastic smile. So he's being a real dick as usual. And then he changes and becomes more serious, and he apologizes for the photos they printed about her daughter, Laura, back in season 2. And just to remind listeners, if you're just joining us on this season of our podcast and you don't remember what happened in season 2, Laura had issues with anxiety and trying to cope with her school and her home life, and she ended up going to a residence that helps young people like her get back on track. And Lagerson, instead of respecting Birgitte's daughter's privacy, he hired photographers to snap photos of her and put them in the paper.
Yeah, it was so gross.
It was
and
mean.
he's only apologizing to Birgitte so she will give him dirt. It's so easy. It's like, why would you wait this long to make that apology? It should have been made much earlier.
Why are you bringing it up now, right?
Yeah,
of course he wants something, right? So he tells her about the photos they printed about Laura back in season 2. We went too close. Sorry about that. She looks at him sternly without missing a beat and says, Mikkel, you went too far and you harmed my daughter. I'll accept your apology the day it appears on your front page. And she rides away, leaving him standing there in silence.
In her perfect outfit with her heels. How do Danish people do this? How do they not get all sweaty? I'm very curious about this bicycling thing there.
Well, I think it's great they bicycle. It's a big part.
Me too.
Yeah.
I wish I could do it here, but it's very dangerous.
Yeah. So the next day at TV1, Pia is telling Torben and Casper that Ravn has given Express a lot of background information, and he's being transparent with Express. Pia calls Ravn an economic genius who could win them the election. So that's good to hear that someone outside of the New Democrats, like Pia, whose opinion we trust and respect with her experience and intelligence, is seeing that Ravn is a genius, economic genius. So it makes the audience understand why Birgitte is putting up with this, right?
Yes.
And keeping Ravn there. So Casper suggests to call Svendage Saltum for a comment from the Freedom Party, and Torben acts like a total dick and says Benedicta is sexier and they should go with her. And the suggestion is to
That's true, but it's not appropriate.
It's not appropriate, right? And we're not dealing with sexiness here. Like, we want an opinion. Who is the person to give the better opinion? But then Torben's point afterwards makes sense. So he says, we should put Ravn up against Benedicta, and he tries to justify himself by saying she is young and she represents another wing of the Freedom Party, which is true.
Yes, she does. Yeah. Svendage is almost like too far the other way. Like, he's so
volatile,
traditional and volatile, like that he kind of makes a joke of himself in a way. Like,
well, he's also so animated that it's dramatic. Sometimes it's hard to drill down to listen to what is he saying. Does it make sense? Because we're so distracted by the theatrics.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Right. So they're all talking, and in this room is Casper, Ulrich, Torben, and Pia. And Ulrich has discovered that Ravn's best friend was an undercover KGB agent and passed information about police intelligence onto the KGB. In their discussion, Ulrich points out that Birgitte's party, the New Democrats, would win 8 seats if there was an election now. Ravn just demolished the Liberals. Hesselbo is scared stiff of Ravn, and Torben says we can't insinuate that Hesselbo leaked information on Ravn. So they're trying to be very cautious about how they play this story up.
Yeah, you can't accuse people of espionage casually.
No, and again, what I like in Torben a lot and respect in him is that he will never present trash and tabloid on TV.
Exactly.
He needs to figure out what exactly is going on and give the correct assessment.
He has a lot of professional integrity.
Yeah. Absolutely. So the next scene now, we're on the Yulin Free show, and Benedicta and Ravn are the guests. And Benedicta says, how can a person with that background be part of a Danish government? And then Casper asks Benedicta, in a democracy, isn't that up to the electorate? Benedicta insinuates that this is high treason, i.e. Ravn's past and what he is doing to sell the country to an enemy. Ravn defends himself by saying, the period in which you refer to was over 20 years ago. I have put that well and truly behind me. I never wanted to sell Denmark to anyone or anything. I have laid all my cards on the table to show that I have nothing to hide. Casper confronts him about the KGB stuff, and he says, obviously, many Danes wonder whether you have told them everything, which is true, because every day there seems something new coming up. Ravn kind of plays innocent, pretending he didn't know all the facts or the bigger picture.
Yeah.
But it tries to challenge him again. Good, because I'm actually on her side on this, even though she is from the Freedom Party. She looks at him and laughs and confronts him and says, your best friend was a KGB agent, and you are on file with a list of names of interest to the KGB. Ravn tries to deflect her and says, you are accusing me of being a traitor and a spy. He says that in this country, you are innocent until proven guilty. I don't have to prove that I was not an agent. You have to prove that I was. I wish you the best of luck, because I wasn't. Yeah. He's not wrong. And actually, at the end of this episode, I'll talk about my thoughts on Ravn, because I kind of feel very conflicted on him. On the one hand, there's things about him that I don't like, but then I think what this show does so beautifully with so many of these characters, they're so multidimensional that you can't just make a decision about them. You see other sides of them that gives you so much rich insight into who they are and why they are the way they are.
Exactly. Yes.
And I think it's excellent character development. I think maybe that's why so many people still like this show, right?
Yes.
So anyways, as the Yulin Free show is about to end, Torben asks Ravn, can you guarantee that there are no more skeletons relating to you and your past? Ravn says, I can't know what the press will decide to jump on, and he can guarantee that he's never been an agent for the KGB or any other foreign power. Birgitte, Jon, and Nida are watching the Yulin Free show back at New Democratic headquarters. And basically, Birgitte says that they need to screen Ravn more carefully with regards to his past so that nothing big and controversial jumps out. And she's not wrong, right?
Yeah.
The next scene, we're back at the hospital. We're in Birgitte's office, and he tells her that the scans came back to show that there have been cell changes. And the doctor thinks that it is looks like precancerous cells, and that he would place her in category 3, and it requires immediate attention. And she asks when, and he says in the next 2 to 3 days. And she opens her eyes, big and surprised, and he commends her and tells her that this is one of the things that she enacted as PM, I guess, to have these accelerated appointments and availability to get follow-up scans and testing.
Yeah,
right.
Especially for something important like high priority.
That's
sure,
right.
You know,
That's
we
right.
need that in Canada. It's so hard to get appointments.
Well, he tells her that she will also need to have radiation therapy 5 times a week for a few minutes each at a time. So at home, she unbuttons her shirt. She feels around her breast area, and she's interrupted by the sound of the kids fighting. So she comes out and yells on them to stop. But we do have that scene with her by herself, and the look on her face. And Amy, you had talked about this in previous episodes about the use of the mirror in this show.
Yes.
And when she's not, because we noted this, you and I, from season 1 to season 2, none of these characters have best friends.
Yeah, they don't.
Right?
Yeah.
So they don't, I mean, Brigitte has Bent, but she doesn't have a BFF to call and say, hey, just, and so what we can deduce is the look on her face when she's looking at herself in the mirror to try and understand what she's thinking and how she's feeling.
And that's really good acting, actually. It's the kind of acting that if you were watching that being filmed, you probably wouldn't even see what was happening. But once it's on camera, it's like, oh, because it's all in the eyes, and it's really, really, really well done. And that mirror becomes like a place. The bathroom in the mirror it becomes a place where like Brigitte self-reflects. It's where we see herself looking into herself. And just as a quick aside, I mean, we talked about her outfit. The bra she's wearing looks super comfortable.
I didn't even notice that.
I totally noticed it.
Like the first time I saw this episode.
I need to go bra shopping. So I was like, oh, look at the wide straps. Like that looks like it has good support and is comfortable. Where did she get, what brand is that?
What does one of my favorite people say? Dita Von Teese, burlesque superstar and fashion icon who has a lingerie line. She says every woman should wear lingerie for themselves. It's the first thing you put on. It's the last thing you take off. And even myself, TMI, I do have very nice garments that I do look at myself in the mirror and admire myself. Like, oh, this looks really great, or the color looks good, or whatever. And it's just that little boost that women can give ourselves. And I think every woman needs to be fitted for a bra. That is what I say.
It's essential. Yeah, it's essential. And doesn't a relative of yours run a shop?
Yes, my cousin has a shop in downtown Toronto at King and Young.
Perfect. If you need a bra, go there. Seriously.
Yeah.
Think about it.
It's really good. Amy, next time you come, I'll take you there.
Sure. Not just a plug because it's Chantal's cousin, but like it's a really good place. She has really great products and she's a pro.
Exactly. So if any people in the Toronto area want the name, just send us a message and we'll tell you.
Yes.
Okay, so we're back at TV1 and Torben's wife shows up and she's pissed off. He's late for a meeting with their marriage therapy session, And I want to say, can we talk? You always talk about how hot the men are. I will say how hot the women are.
I know.
Right?
His wife, I was like, Alex was not wrong when he made that gross comment.
His wife is very attractive. And Nita, I think, is extremely sexy. The redheaded on the New Democrat Party. And Benedicta, I think, is beautiful too. Right? So there's eye candy for everybody.
I love Torben's wife's haircut. Her hair is spectacular.
It looked like a fresh cut to me. Like it was all the lines were really well. Anyways, so I put a note here as I trying to have fun writing these monologues. I said, all dateable. I would choose Torben's wife.
Yes.
You know what's going to be revealed about Nita, so she's trouble. No, thank you. Benedicta is gonna make the moves on Ulrich coming up. No, thank you. Plus, she's from the Freedom Party, a party that I would not support. And poor Torben's wife is being cheated on, so maybe she would value going out on a date with somebody.
Yeah, I should say so. If she's in marriage therapy, she could use a little distraction of the kind we were discussing in the previous episode.
Exactly.
But without the money, know,
or with the money.
I would gladly help Philip break his streak of only sleeping with the mother of his children. I'd be okay with that. That'd be okay. And you know who else is really good looking and like really fit? Jon. There's a scene where he like, and I know he's like the gay man, but like I'm looking. He leans on the desk and like his triceps go, and I'm just like, that guy works out and he has cool hair. He just does. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, and he's a vegetarian.
That's right. Yeah. Doesn't he eat bugs at some point? Like,
I don't know.
That's something weird. Yeah. But he's great.
I don't know. So, So I said that is someone I should get my time getting to know Torben's wife. And then Torben can go out with Pia.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I really like Pia and I want Pia to be happy. And she's very into Torben. So I can take Torben's wife.
Yeah, that works out.
Okay, enough silliness. Let's get back on track. Oh yes, I have a note saying I find Pia very attractive, very brainy and sexy, and I would definitely say yes to date with her. Okay, I'm going woman crazy and should make it back to the monologue.
Springtime. It's springtime. What can you do?
All right. So Torben and his wife have this tender moment, and even though she's pissed off at him, when he genuinely starts getting emotional and sad and saying that he's got so much pressure and he's having such a hard time remembering everything, his wife snaps out of being pissed at him and tells him words of comfort and consolation. And she instills confidence in him again. And he apologizes to her again and gives her a quick kiss on the lips. And they're seen cuddling, walking down the hallway out of TV1 so that they can make their marriage therapy appointment. And on the way out, they pass Pia, who pretends not to notice, but we see that Pia has seen them walking by. So that can't be easy. Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So the next scene is Torben sitting down on the patio at a coffee shop. And this is where the jewelry comment is going to come in, Amy.
Right.
So the next scene, Torben is sitting down on the patio of a coffee shop, drinking a coffee. Another nice place, Amy, that looks fabulous to go if we go to Denmark. Outdoor cafes. So Lagerson shows up, and Lagerson thinks that they are meeting because Torben has a story for Lagerson and his trashy newspaper Express. Torben begins telling Lagerson that he's sick and tired of TV1 and there's no money in it, and they have a new boss. And Lagerson says, Alexander Hjort. And Torben says, yes, it is effing irritating. 34 years old, very, very young. He wears male jewelry, Mikkel.
It's just so funny. It's like, okay, boomer, but it's like, it's really funny. And like, as you know, I'm approaching 50, so it's kind of like, yeah, but I'm not quite as stick in the mud as those guys, but that comment really made me giggle.
I know. And Torben says,
for me, it's more the furniture than the accessories. It's like, really, chairs.
I don't care about the accessories. I don't think that makes him a dick. I think it's the furniture and his attitude that makes him a dick.
Like, why chairs you can't sit on? What is the point of that? It's just stupid.
Anyways, so Torben says, I just can't cope. And Lagerson says, that is really depressing, but why are you telling me all of this? Do you want me as a counselor or do you want a hug?
Yeah, it's so funny.
That was hilarious. I actually did laugh out loud and thought Lagerson was funny. So Torben says that he wants to quit and apply for a job that Lagerson advertised as a new political editor. We've known each other from college, and I think it's time that we work together, says Torben. Lagerson asks, is this a job interview? And Torben says, no, this is an offer for you. And Lagerson says he needs to be honest with Torben. And he says, you aren't sexy anymore, Torben. You are an admin officer on TV1. This is the age of the younger generation. For a news editor, I look at journalists 30 to 32 years old max. My best advice for you is to stay pals with the fellow with the jewels. And I want to say, I love this scene so much because Lagerson is a bigger dick than Torben. Let's not forget a few minutes ago about how he doesn't want Svendage to come on Yulin Fries. He wants Benedicta because he thinks Benedicta is like sexy. And now Lagerson is handing his ass to him and saying, well, you're not sexy, so I'm not hiring.
Exactly.
Love it.
Yeah. Karma is a beat.
Love it. But I love the reversal of this ageism and sort of, ageism of, no, you're not hot anymore, Torben. We're not putting you.
You're not cool. Yeah.
I love it.
Exactly.
And again, the show plays with people and personalities so well. Usually I don't like Lagerson, but in this moment I wanted to like high five.
Yeah, me too. I was giggling away. Yeah, it was like, way to go, Peter, the actor.
I just thought it was so great.
Yeah.
He's getting to taste his own medicine. All right, let me see here. I just talked about ageism, how we women, as we all know, every woman listening to this podcast, we never get the day off from being objectified everywhere we go. You know, men looking up down at us like meat. It's shameful, and it's no gentleman with class or manners would ever say or act like this. And somehow men feel that we are on their viewing display for their viewing pleasure and have the right to be treated. We have the right to be treated based on how they perceive the way we look. And again, we will say, Amy, hashtag, not all men.
Not all men.
Not all men. There are wonderful men who get it, who we know in our lives that are important friends to us, who deeply respect women. But I have to say, I love this stereotype turned upside down. So the next scene's Katrina stepping off the train. And I thought, how exciting, because we are seeing a different scene. We have never seen anybody.
She's gone to Malmo in Sweden, which is pretty close to Denmark.
Yes, so I looked it up. So I thought it was very exciting being on the transit with them, because that's one of the things I love to do when I go to a city, especially a foreign city. i.e. not in North America. So I checked Google Maps because I like to figure out these people and their lives and what is going on. So Malmo is 40 minutes away from Copenhagen.
Yeah, it's really close.
Yeah, so what this trip is about is that she is going to visit someone named Vasily and Andreev. And it's very funny where they meet. They meet at a closed down carnival. So you see carnival rides in the background and
Yeah,
walking through with a coffee, and he has a coffee for her. And
it's so spy stuff.
Yeah,
it's so spy.
Colonel, and I have his title down below. I'll get to it when I get to it. But he's an ex-colonel, and she's there to talk about Ravn because she's trying to get to
a Soviet ex-colonel.
Soviet ex-colonel. That's it. Soviet ex-colonel. So she's trying to get to the root and bottom of Ravn and trying to like know everything there is to know about him because she's tired of things coming out and popping out, right? Yeah. So he confirms that Ravn had never worked for them, and
the KGB.
In the KGB, yes, yeah. Yes, that's right. He is a part of the KGB.
Yes,
this
of course.
Yeah, and he confirms that Ravn had never worked for them, the KGB.
Yeah.
So then,
and he's a defector.
He's a defector.
Left. Yeah, he defected, right? Like he couldn't go back to Moscow. He says, you know.
Yeah, so maybe that's why he landed and chose should be far away, go to another country. Anyways, Katrine calls Han and tells her the scoop. Later that day, Ulrich reports that Ravn has now been cleared of any wrongdoing by the former KGB colonel. That's it, he's a KGB colonel.
Yep.
Vasily Andreev, and he reports to Hannah home. Or Ulrich says that Han went to visit Andreev because, of course, she needs to get the story from her own mouth as well. And in the clip, we see Andreev being interviewed, and we hear Hannah Holmes speaking in English. And I always get so excited when these characters speak in English.
Yeah, Katrine's voice sounds different in English. It sounds deeper.
It sounds different, but I just think it's so cool. It's almost like they sound like different people sometimes.
Yeah. Hannah sounds cool in English, yeah, for sure.
Hannah sounds cool in English, but I think it's really neat to hear them talking in multi-languages, which is not something you see on North American TV, right?
No, never, hardly ever.
Never. Anyways, so the clip that Han runs that Ulrich is showing on his newscast is to say that Ravn is cleared. And I say to this, we have to thank Katrine, because in my opinion, she's never lost her investigative journalist ways and wants to always get to the root of the story. Yeah. Sort of thus making her such a good choice for a spin doctor.
Yeah, exactly. And the ex-Soviet, he has the friend, right? It's the friend who was the issue, not Ravn. Like,
yes, it was the friend.
Yeah, the friend was handing info, and like Vasily is really great as a character because he like absolutely defends Ravn completely. He's like, I have no, he was never part of our agency. He never gave us any information. He never broke any rules. He was not the issue, and he shouldn't have to defend himself.
That's right. And I believe him because nobody knew Katrine was going there to have put the bug in Vasily's ear to say, we want you to answer like this.
Yeah, exactly.
So Katrine is going to do more investigative work because the scene changes, and she's at home relaxing. She gets a call from someone that says Jan asked them to call her. This is an inspector, some sort of inspector calling her to say that yet again, they have new dirt on Ravn. And I say, honestly, this is too much. Like, I would lose my patience, and I could not do this song and dance with Ravn every time. Are you guilty? Are you not guilty? It's exhausting, right? So Katrine invites Ravn over to her apartment, and he's acting very shifty and evasive. And she's asking him pointed questions about the women he's had relationships in his past, particularly one woman. And he's not being forthcoming with her when she's asking him some basic questions. And she yells on him, which I love, because this is the second time ever we've seen Katrine get so angry, which she deserves to be here. Yeah. She's definitely in charge, to show her that she is in charge here. And she's trying to protect Birgitte and the New Democrats. And he's giving her very basic answers, but she knows the truth because she had investigated this story and knows that this woman that she's referring to had sadly committed suicide when she was seeing Ravn. And, or at least that's the interpretation I got, that it was during that time that she had a relationship with him. And Ravn says that he broke up with this woman because he'd had enough. And she yells at him again and says, that is not the truth. And he yells back and says, why are you asking me then if you know the answer? And she tries to press him again. He says it's personal. A few minutes later, because the baby starts crying because they're both yelling now. Ravn becomes more ready to talk. And you could see, and this is I thought he's so great in this role. And to me, such a great
Mikkelsen.
actor.
Yeah,
exactly.
So good.
And
both of them are so good.
The light and camera, they're like, light is on his face, and you see the emotion in his eyes and the tears coming. And he says that him and this woman, they met in university and they were going to have a baby together, but in about the 6-month time point of pregnancy, she lost the baby and she was very depressed.
That's so traumatic. That's so traumatic.
Oh yeah, I can only imagine.
6 months. I mean, that's well past like normal miscarriage period. Like normally if a pregnancy goes wrong, it happens in the first 3 or 4 months. And anything after that, like, it's pretty grim. It's pretty grim.
Yes. So that's the real reason. So, Katrine was trying to uncover something that she thought was sketchy about him, but this is actually something very deeply personal.
Yeah. It's a tragedy.
It's a tragedy. And later on in a few minutes, I'll talk about it, but how she reacts to how that scene went. The next day, Birgitte Ravn asked to have a private word with Birgitte. Basically, he tells her like he can't deal with this anymore, and that he's got to go. And she has to inform the press, right? So the next day, Simon tells Pia and Torben that Birgitte has agreed to do an exclusive interview. Ulrich reports later that Ravn has decided not to run for parliament and says that he refuses to accept smears and innuendo in the press based on views that he abandoned years ago. And he was accused of certain people of being a Soviet spy. And Ulrich reports that Ravn is going to be remain a professor of economics at the Copenhagen University. So the next scene, of course, they want Brigitte's reaction. Hannah's interviewing her, and Birgitte says she regrets his decision, but it's up to the individual to decide whether this kind of publicity is acceptable. Hannah asked her if he was too sensitive, and Birgitte says no, his life was turned inside out. So this is the scene now. We're very close to the end. Ravn comes to the office at night to clear his things out of the office, and Katrina's there working. And they have a moment together where she apologizes to him for going too far regarding asking him about the woman from the past. And he says, without turning around to face her, maybe he's still emotional over it, very understandably so. He says to her something very nice. It is your job to uncover stories before the media uncovers them. It's your job to get to the meat, the heart of it first before it gets out to the press. And as he's handing her back the keys, their hands touch. And they pause and look at each other for a couple of seconds, and he turns away and leaves. Right.
It's so electric. Ooh la la. That's going somewhere later.
Yeah, that is going to come back later in the next episodes coming up. So the next scene now, the next day, Jan says, and this made me laugh out loud. Jan says, if anyone says Soviet or past, I am going to throw up.
Yeah, totally. He's so funny. He's one of my favorites.
Oh God. And I said to myself in my own comments here, I'm like, this Ravn storyline is so tiresome. Like, if there is more, I don't want to hear more about Ravn. Like this, like I said, I was very frustrated to do this song and dance all the time. Are you, aren't you? Are you, aren't you?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And it's interesting too, because it's like reflective of the whole communist period, which was like, so mysterious and so shady, and like so many questionable activities going on, and like who was trustable and who wasn't. I mean, that's what a Cold War is, right? It's kind of an interesting period in history, recent history. Knowing people who were living under totalitarian regimes like my own age is kind of weird,
So
kind of
almost
interesting.
towards the end now, Brigitte tells Jan that he'll handle the finance portfolio, and he's a bit snappy back to her and says in front of everyone, I'd like to know if that's just until you have found a better candidate, because if that's the case, we need to find a solution now. And I have to say, I really admire Jan because I think he's got guts. And like what I said earlier on in this episode, it's important for Brigitte to have someone to keep her in check.
Yeah, he's not just kissing her ass. Like
exactly.
He wants answers. He wants all of these things spelled out, and he's holding her accountable. And that's perfectly fine, but in a very professional way. He's not being a jerk about it.
Correct.
Not
correct.
So a little bit cheeky, maybe, but
a little bit cheeky, but they have a good relationship. Like, you know, like I'll say that here now in this sentence, it says, I say I admire Jan, he's got guts. And Brigitte says, Jan, it's your area until at least after the next election. So no one at the table, the other party members, no one objects. And Brigitte and Jan have a smile and a nod together. And that to me means that they are friends. I mean, Brigitte, it's all cool to think that he's attacking me.
Exactly.
Right. She knows that this is very healthy to have someone make her accountable and keep her in check. So Eric Hoffman now has a great idea that they need to start screening the next set of candidates. Why don't they start tomorrow? And Brigitte says she can't make it. And Jan says they could start without her. And she says she's seeing her father and she can't make it.
But we all know it's her appointment.
Yeah. So the next and final scene to close out the episode is that she's at the hospital with the doctor telling her about the anesthetics, and that the very last scene is her laying down on the stretcher, looking up at the ceiling, being wheeled to the operating room. Yeah. And that's how the episode ended.
Yeah, it's so good. And so, like, obviously, you know, we're looking at the health issue is really interesting because this is something so many women go through, you know, like breast cancer is not an unknown thing. It's happened to people in my life. It's happening to people in my life right now. By the way, listeners with the breasts, go get your mammograms. Just saying, go do it. Go do it. Thank you for this public service announcement. Please take care of your health. It's really important to do so, and don't delay and don't be too busy for it. If something's weird, go get checked.
Yeah.
You know? And the Danish healthcare system just looks so good. It's like, it just looks so, oh, you have a problem, we'll take care of it in 2 days. What? 2 days, really?
Yeah, I know. That's really unheard of. And I don't know if things are still like that speed.
Yeah, I have no idea. Yeah.
But at that time, at least. I think these stories about Ravn, when I think about it, I go back to the saying, no press is bad press. So even though we don't know what's going on with him, can we trust him? Can we not trust him? What are his intentions? The fact that his name is in the papers every day and he's in her party, I think it's good press for her, even though we don't know, right? Is he a good guy?
They're getting attention. Yeah. And it's interesting too, because like we hear, you know, oh, he said this, or he was accused of this or accused of that. And all of that stuff is old, right? All of that information is 30 years old or 25 years old, at least. And people are getting all their knickers in a twist about it. But he's like renounced the communist thing. He's working in economics that are clearly capitalist. He's part of the Danish economic system, which is clearly capitalist, although more, you know, yes, there's social safety networks and all that stuff in Scandinavia, of course, but like, he's not a communist at this point. But these questions still come up. And it's like, if we look at the previous episode about the sex workers, it's like questioning people's past. Like, how much can you question them? At what point do you have to start believing them? And I really do. I thought it was interesting too, that you mentioned like Katrine's journalistic instincts, because I noticed that in the last episode too, like she just wants to find out all of as much information as she can about everything, which is really good. And,
it's really good and it educates her.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Not only as a professional, but maybe her stance on sex work changed after she spent quite a bit of time with Helen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I mean, it
And
was pretty intimate. She went to Helene's home twice, I believe.
twice, yeah, and almost sat on some dildos or something. It was
Yeah.
pretty funny. It's pretty funny, you know.
But I think it's very, I mean, that's what's great about Katrina is that she has this desire to learn more,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Part of her
she's not.
job. That's what makes her such a great journalist.
Yeah, I mean, she knows she has her own stance, and then like, okay, but what else is there to know about this? Like, she knows that her thoughts are not the only thoughts, you
Right.
know.
It doesn't end with her thoughts. Correct. So I will say that for me, now that Power and Glory is out, it was very thrilling to see Lagerson and Birgitte in a scene together alone
Yep,
here in this my episode here, number 6 in
yep,
season 3, because they have a few scenes alone in Power and Glory, and it's to
yep.
contrast them. It's very interesting to see how both characters have changed when we
Yeah,
get to
totally.
Power and Glory. So yeah, I think it's great. We talked about the wardrobe. Even Katrine's wardrobe is looking quite smart. She's got
Yeah.
these great blazers.
Yeah, there's one scene where she's wearing this like peach colored shirt and like the cuffs are rolled up and the cuffs have a darker orange. And I was like, I like
Yeah.
that.
And Casper's wardrobe has changed now that he's not a spin doctor. I noticed when him and Pia and Torben and Ulrich were all talking, when they were talking about inviting Benedicta in, he was wearing a shirt and a blazer, but the shirt was unbuttoned, his
Unbuttoned.
shirt was
Yeah.
untucked. So
Yeah.
he's more casual now, no
Yeah.
tie on.
Yeah. Yeah,
And what else do I want to
exactly.
say? Is there anything you want to say about this?
I think I interjected everything I wanted to say. I thought the Cold War angle was kind of neat. Like, and like people, sometimes I have friends who have like a certain like amount of nostalgia for that period, but like if you actually talk to people who lived under it, there's nothing to be nostalgic about. Like in in Romania in the 80s under Ceausescu, there was an open period in the 70s. I just listened to a podcast about this. It's crazy. Um, called Decoder Ring, and there's a thing about Columbo and Peter Falk delivering a video message to the Romanian people, and that actually happened. Go listen to that. It's great. It's really great. It's a good podcast. I mean, listen to ours too, but you know that one's really good. And
Yeah.
and in the 80s, Ceausescu was so hard lined against his own people. Like power was cut off for a certain number of hours a day. People were only allowed to have like one light bulb. Like the images, like something my mom talks about is because I've been there a few times. I have friends there and stuff. And the images that my mom associates with Romania is like the videos of like these like horrendous orphanages where these like abandoned and neglected babies. And the reason that those orphanages existed in the 80s in Romania is because of there was no birth control allowed and there was no abortion, because they wanted to like build the nation basically. Ceausescu wanted to like increase the population, and that just was like so harmful in so many ways, you know. And there's a really good film about that called 4 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days, about two women seeking an abortion right in the 80s, right towards the end of that regime. That's a really, really excellent film. Oh, it's part of the Romanian New Wave cinema. There's a group of filmmakers. I forget who directed that one exactly.
Can you say the name again?
4 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days.
Okay, so if listeners want to check it out, there you go. There's a title.
Yeah.
I will say one thing. This is gonna be my closing comment, unless you have other things you want to chat about. But my closing comment that I have in my head is that this was a huge. These two episodes, yours and mine, that we talked about today, were huge, I think, for Katrine.
Yes.
To have the lens of not being in support of sex work, and then, like I said, having those private discussions with Helene. But in this episode here, what I noted, what I thought was so significant is this is another man, Ravn, that is in Katrine's close proximity, that reveals a very deep and heavy and dark secret to her.
Yeah, and she says she hates secrets and has a problem with them, and that's why she blew up at him. Understandable.
But she didn't know what it was about, right? She thought it was some political thing. But when she understood it was something so deeply personal. And this is why what I like in Katrine a lot, I think she is a very supportive friend, coworker, partner.
Yeah, she has a lot of empathy for people's emotional situations.
She does, which means that she's very emotionally mature.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, I'm glad that if this story had to come out, it was Katrine listening to Ravn and giving him support and apologizing to him because she understands the gravity of this situation he was in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I have nothing more to add either, though. I'm good. I think I've said
nothing more to add.
everything.
Do you want to tell people what's coming up next? What we're going to take a break and get ready to record in a few minutes?
You tell the people.
Me tell the people. Okay, so
You tell the people.
Amy and I are excited to announce we have a bonus episode coming up. And I think this is our first bonus episode of the season.
I think so. Yeah.
It is our first.
I think
so.
Yeah.
It's one of 3 bonus episodes. And in bonus episodes, in case you've never listened to us before, in season 1, season 2, this is where we go a bit deeper. We take a deeper dive into characters or plots or discussions that we want to talk about. And our first bonus episode is going to be about articles and interviews about Borgen. And that's going to be coming up next. And then later on in our podcast series, we're going to be featuring the men of Borgen. So Amy and I have started thinking and talking about that already. We're taking 6 men to profile. Amy's going to do 3. I'm going to do 3. And then the last bonus episode we have planned is going to be about Birgitte and Katrine. And compare and contrast them, how they were in the first 2 seasons versus now in their life in season 3.
Yep.
Yeah.
Correct.
That's coming up. All right. So let me take us out of this. We'd like to thank our listeners for joining us in this episode. You can check us out on our website, theborgenpodcast.com, where all of our episodes are archived and where you can learn more about us and the show. We'd like to thank our good friend Garth Jensen for providing our intro and outro music. Thank you very much, Garth. And lastly, don't forget to check us out on all social media platforms and subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app. We are there and we'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to connect with us and share what's on your mind by using the hashtag #TheBorgenPodcast or by sending us an email or voice memo to theborgenpodcast@gmail.com.